a delight. You were a poor kid.
Yeah, we were. We were very poor. We didn't have a yardstick to measure it by then. Everybody
I thought
was
you were going to say we didn't have a yard.
Glenn Campbell lived a double life. On stage, he was the polished country music star audiences adored, the golden boy with the effortless tenor and dazzling guitar runs. But offstage, a dark secret threatened to destroy him, a private world of addictions and emotional wreckage that few could have imagined. To his fans, he embodied the American dream, a sharecropper's son who reached the pinnacle of pop and country success. Behind the scenes, however, a very different story unfolded. Failed marriages, stormy romances, and a growing collection of vices that kept this guitar-playing crooner from the happiness he desperately craved. He eventually found a measure of peace on a golf course, with a surprising and unlikely companion, but it came too little, too late. Glenn Travis Campbell was born into hardship in a tiny Arkansas town called Delight, a place so small it barely registered on a map. He grew up on a farm where his family scratched out a living growing potatoes, corn, cotton, and even watermelons. Money was so scarce that the children sometimes had to eat squirrel just to survive. There were no frills, no electricity, no running water in the house. The workday started before dawn and ended after dark, and young Glenn's hands were calloused from picking cotton long before they ever touched guitar strings. Yet it was in this lean, isolated world that a life-changing moment arrived. One day his father came home having dug deep into his pockets, unboxing 2 guitars, a beat-up acoustic and an electric, for which he had paid just $5 from the Sears catalog. Campbell was 4 years old. By the time he was 6, he had taught himself enough chords and finger-picking patterns to play on local radio stations, standing on a crate to reach the microphone. He still labored on the farm when he had to, but every spare moment was spent hunched over that guitar, his ear pressed to the radio, learning by mimicking the country and gospel sounds that spilled out of the speaker. Since picking a guitar didn't bring in money, Campbell made a big decision at 14. He quit school in the 10th grade and joined his brothers working in Houston. He tried installing insulation and pumping gas, but nothing captured his imagination like music. He played a little around Houston, yet his true break didn't come until he was 17, when he visited his uncle in Albuquerque, New Mexico, performed with his uncle's band, and appeared on his radio show. A television appearance on a children's program at KOB led to more than a paycheck. It led him to Diane Marie Kirk. They married at the courthouse when Campbell was just 18, and Kirk was 16, and already expecting a child. The teenage marriage began with tragedy. Their son, Glenn Travis Campbell Jr., arrived 2 months premature on July 25, 1955, and lived only a few days. A healthy daughter, Deborah Kay, followed the next year, but fatherhood would not sideline Campbell's musical ambitions. In 1960, Campbell moved to Los Angeles, the epicenter of the recording industry, and threw himself into session work. He quickly became one of the most in-demand guitarists in town, joining an elite group of studio musicians, later known as the Wrecking Crew. The Wrecking Crew was a loose collective of versatile players: drummer Hal Blaine, bassist Carol Kay, keyboardist Leon Russell, who anonymously performed on hundreds of hit records, Campbell's nimble finger-picking and distinctive 12-string guitar sound enriched tracks for the Beach Boys, Frank Sinatra, Doris Day, Sammy Davis Jr., the Monkees, and countless others. His credits include the swirling guitar on the Beach Boys' masterpiece Good Vibrations, the jangly intro to the Byrds' Mr. Tambourine Man, though not the hit version he contributed to early sessions, and the soundtrack for Viva Las Vegas, where he forged a lasting friendship with Elvis Presley. The two men bonded over their shared background. Both had grown up picking cotton and living a simple rural life before rock and roll changed everything. In Campbell, Presley saw a kindred spirit, a country boy who never forgot the dirt roads of his youth. Campbell's background may have been simple, but his love life was anything but. He divorced Diane in 1959 and quickly remarried, this time to a beautician, Billie Jean Nunley, on September 20th, 1959. Before their divorce in 1976, They would have 3 children together, bringing Campbell's total to 4. Amid marriages and fatherhood, he still managed to launch his own recording career. In 1961, he signed with Crest Records and released Turn Around, Look at Me, a maudlin ballad that became a modest success and prompted him to form a group he called the GCs, presumably short for Glenn Campbell. The name, however, sounded confusingly similar to Australia's Bee Gees, and the confusion deepened when the Bee Gees themselves covered Turn Around, Look at Me. Neither act had much luck with the song. The 1968 version by the Vogues became the definitive hit. Working as a session musician, Campbell played on a staggering 586 recordings, yet he had a surprising secret. He never learned to read music. When he landed a gig with a large orchestra, he came clean about his inability. The conductor simply had the ensemble play the piece through once, and Campbell's remarkable ear allowed him to replicate his part perfectly. But studio work alone wouldn't bring him fame. He needed to step into the spotlight. His chance arrived in 1965 when the Beach Boys needed a temporary replacement for Brian Wilson, who was buckling under the pressures of touring and a burgeoning mental health crisis. Campbell learned the bass parts and the high falsetto harmonies within days, and filled in seamlessly, earning the band's gratitude. As thanks, Wilson offered him a song called Guess I'm Dumb, and produced it lavishly with strings and horns. The track required Campbell to leap between octaves with precise control, but despite its sophistication, it failed to chart. Undeterred, Campbell turned to a protest song, recording a cover of Buffy Sainte-Marie's Universal Soldier, a pacifist anthem that seemed to protest the Vietnam War. The song became his biggest hit to date and led many to assume Campbell held anti-war sentiments. When asked about draft card burners, however, he shocked everyone by saying their punishment should be hanging. The revelation caused an uproar. His record company was mortified. Controversy, combined with a string of failed follow-ups, brought Campbell to the brink of being dropped by Capitol Records. Given one last chance, Capitol paired him with producer Al DeLory, ordering them to deliver a hit. The result was Burning Bridges, a breezy, bittersweet song that climbed to the top 20 on the country charts. The partnership flourished, producing timeless classics like Gentle on My Mind, with its intricate stream of consciousness lyrics, and the melancholy masterpiece By the Time I Get to Phoenix, written by a young Jimmy Webb. At the 1967 Grammy Awards, Campbell took home 4 trophies, 2 for each song, beating out formidable competition. The next year, his album By the Time I Get to Phoenix defeated the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band for Album of the Year. His career had turned around completely, and Hollywood soon came knocking. John Wayne and his daughter visited Campbell backstage after a concert and asked if he'd like to be in a movie. Unbeknownst to Campbell, the producers had originally wanted Elvis Presley for the role of LaBeouf in True Grit, but Presley's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, insisted on top billing over Wayne and co-star Kim Darby. That demand was flatly rejected, so Campbell got the part, a huge risk for someone with almost no acting experience. Director Henry Hathaway was notoriously tough and grew frustrated with Campbell's wooden delivery, later calling him lazy and stiff. Campbell himself would joke that his acting was so poor it made Wayne look brilliant, helping the legend finally win his only Oscar. Despite the on-set tension, Campbell earned a BAFTA nomination for Most Promising Newcomer. The camera liked his easy smile and rugged good looks, and that led to his own variety show, The Glenn Campbell Good Time Hour, which blended country music with comedy sketches and boasted fledgling writers like Steve Martin and Rob Reiner. Guests ranged from the Beatles and Johnny Cash to John Wayne and Carol Burnett. Emboldened by his TV success, Campbell tried film again with Norwood, co-starring football star Joe Namath. Posters declared, "It's good time Glenn and Super Joe doing what they do best." Apparently, their best wasn't good enough. Critics called the movie hokey, but harmless, and one compared his film foray unfavorably to Elvis Presley's string of movies. Norwood would be Campbell's last feature film. He returned his focus to what he did best, making records. In 1974, while touring in Australia, Campbell heard a song on the radio that stopped him in his tracks. Larry Weiss's Rhinestone Cowboy told the story of an aging musician riding out the highs and lows of fame, a narrative of perseverance that mirrored Campbell's own journey from poverty to stardom. He identified with every line. Back in the States, he convinced a reluctant Capitol to let him record it, and he labored over the track, layering his voice into an anthemic crescendo. The song became a phenomenon, soaring to #1 on both the Billboard Hot Country Singles and Hot 100 charts, crossing him definitively into pop superstardom. Hollywood, predictably, wanted to turn the hit into a movie, but Campbell declined the lead. Rhinestone eventually starred Sylvester Stallone and Dolly Parton and was savaged by critics, earning 9 Golden Raspberry nominations and a Worst Actor trophy for Stallone. Campbell had dodged a bullet, but his own personal troubles were escalating faster than his career. The success of Rhinestone Cowboy had magnified every dark impulse. He drank heavily to cope with the pressures of fame, filled his dressing rooms with vodka and pills, and cheated on his wife with a string of women. His marriage to Billie Jean Nunley collapsed under the weight of neglect and infidelity, ending in divorce in 1978. The partying intensified, and soon a substantial portion of his fortune was disappearing up his nose. Campbell later pointed a finger at his third wife, Sarah Barr, the ex-wife of singer Mac Davis, claiming she introduced him to the heavy drugs that sent him spiraling. Barr, by all accounts, was a destructive presence, and after a few chaotic years, Campbell hit rock bottom, freebasing cocaine in Las Vegas hotel rooms, paranoid and out of control. He divorced Barr in 1980, but rather than seek help, he leapt into another combustible relationship. He began dating Tanya Tucker, the husky-voiced Delta Dawn singer who was just 22 and already battling her own demons with alcohol and pills. The union of these two volatile personalities was a powder keg. At first, the romance seemed glamorous. Campbell threw Tucker an extravagant $57,000 22nd birthday party, and they recorded the sultry duet Dream Lover, which earned a Grammy nomination. But the passion quickly curdled into chaos. They fought publicly and violently. She cracked his ribs, and he allegedly hurled chairs. One infamous argument at the New York Plaza Hotel left a room completely trashed, broken furniture, shattered glass, and cost Campbell $1,200 in damages. When the relationship finally ended, Tucker sought $3 million in alimony, alleging that Campbell had knocked out her 2 front teeth during a rage. Campbell labeled the affair poisoned and my insanity. Tucker, for her part, later declared he was the love of her life, a testament to the tangled intensity between them. To move on, Campbell went on a blind date and, without addressing his addictions, entered yet another marriage. He met Kim Woolen in 1981 and married her the following year. Woolen soon discovered the monster that emerged when he was high. He once pointed a pistol at her, and his volatile behavior filled their home with dread. Yet she refused to abandon him. She gave him an ultimatum: quit drugs and alcohol or she would leave, and played him a cassette recording of his own drunken, incoherent rambling. Hearing himself slur and babble was a shock that finally drove him to get sober. He joined a church with Woolen and credited her with saving his life. From 1989 onward, he claimed sobriety, but the past still had a way of catching up. In 2003, police in Phoenix pulled him over on suspicion of drunk driving. When the officer asked his name, Campbell puffed out his chest and announced, "Glenn Campbell, the Rhinestone Cowboy." The bravado didn't help. He was belligerent, claimed he had only ordered a Coke, and then attempted to knee one of the officers. Witnesses at the station reported him belting out, "By the time I get to Phoenix," in the holding cell. The judge was not entertained and sentenced him to 10 days in jail, a humiliating coda for a man who had once stood atop the music world. Campbell's final act was both tragic and profoundly dignified. In 2011, at age 75, he publicly announced that he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Rather than retreat in shame, he embarked on a remarkable farewell tour, playing 151 shows over 18 months with his children backing him in the band. A documentary crew captured the journey for the film I'll Be Me, which unflinchingly portrayed his memory lapses and moments of confusion, but also his undiminished musical instinct. He could still shred a guitar solo even when he couldn't recall his children's names. He recorded the heartbreaking original song, I'm Not Gonna Miss You, a love letter to his wife acknowledging that, while his memories would fade, his love would not. The song won a Grammy and was nominated for an Oscar. When the tour finally ended, Campbell retreated to a long-term care facility in Nashville, where he spent his final years playing guitar for fellow residents. He passed away on August 8, 2017, at age 81. Tanya Tucker wrote and performed Forever Loving You as a tribute, enraging Kim Woolen, who accused her of exploiting Campbell's death for publicity. Even after he was gone, familial turmoil continued. Campbell had fathered 9 children across his 4 marriages. When his will was read, 3 of the children from his marriage to Billie Jean Nunley discovered they had been completely disinherited. They initially contested the document, but eventually dropped their legal challenge for undisclosed reasons. Despite the turbulent relationships and personal demons, many who knew Campbell remembered him as a gentle soul at his core. Shock rocker Alice Cooper called him a golden boy who could comfortably mingle with anyone, a truck driver, a movie star, a fellow musician, with that same gracious smile. It was that innate warmth, that genuine, down-home charisma that shined through every note he sang and every string he plucked. The Rhinestone Cowboy may have ridden a bumpy trail, but the music he left behind remained smooth, timeless, and true.